Hello everybody, I'm reading another chapter of Horrorstör by Grady Hendrix. This is chapter 11, and it is the Bodavest. Looks like a pretty frightening contraption there, which goes along with the tone of our story. So the article for that says, boasting several advantages over traditional forms of restraint, Bodavest confines the penitent and opposes the agitated movement of blood toward the brain, forcing the subject into a state of total immobility, conducive to self-reflection and free of stressful outside stimuli. So that's concerning. So we'll start the story then. Hands. There were hands on her face like two soft spiders crawling over her skin. She couldn't gulp enough air to make a sound. All that came out was a pathetic mewling. The big sound, the insane sound, was still trapped inside her head. Light smashed into her eyes. Her pupils contracted to pinpricks. Shh, 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 it's me, it's Basil. Are you okay? Amy wanted to turn her head away, but the straps held it in place. Because her eyes had grown accustomed to the darkness, she was blinded by the dim glow of his cell phone. If she'd been capable of speech, she would have told him to go away, to leave her alone. Basil ran his fingers over the straps, which were as taut and rigid as steel. Amy's body was numb. Circulation to her extremities had all but ceased. Her limbs were as cold and lifeless as wood. Blood-starved, they had floated away on a sea of pain, one by one. Then Basil simply turned and walked away, taking his light with him. Amy closed her eyes and felt tears slipping down her cheeks. They were tears of relief. Now she could be alone again in the dark. It was cruel to make her think that someone had come for her. It was sadistic to make her think that she was not alone when she knew that she was always alone. The strap holding her chin in place got tighter and tighter and then snapped and was gone. She involuntarily sucked in a great mouthful of air and gagged on it. Her lungs wouldn't inflate enough to force it all down. Take it easy, Basil whispered. Small breaths. He was crouched behind her chair, foolishly trying to rescue her from what she had already embraced, taking away what she truly wanted just when she had finally found it, pretending that she could get out of her chair, telling her lies. A good manager carries a pocket blade at all times, he was saying. You never know when a customer will need help opening a flat pack. With a sudden snap, the straps binding her chest came loose. The instant rush of oxygen made Amy's head spin. She tried to talk, but managed only nonsensical sounds. She could feel Basil working all around her, on her sides, behind her, slashing away with his knife. One by one, the straps on her fingers and wrists and forearms and elbows went slack. Each time there was a blessed moment of numbness, and then the limb exploded into fire as the blood rushed back, hammering pins and needles into the tips of her fingers and toes. It hurt so badly, and what was the point? She wasn't going anywhere. Why couldn't he stop trying and leave her alone? Amy, please talk to me, Basil said from the darkness. Amy held very still, her body racked with tremors. I've been stumbling around in the dark looking for anyone, he said. All the power is out. The exit signs aren't working, the air is shut off, and to be honest, if this is what that sick freak did to you, then I don't want to hang around and wait for him to come back. Come on. Amy didn't move. She didn't speak. All she did was close her eyes and sink back into the darkness. I'm going to help you stand, Basil said. She didn't talk. She hoped that if she didn't talk, he would go away. Instead, he stood behind her, grabbed underneath her armpits, and hauled her up. As her weight shifted, she felt boiling oil draining into her ankles and feet. The feeling was so excruciating that she slithered out of Basil's grip and slumped to the floor. Instinctively, she drew her legs into a fetal position, sobbing as she hugged her knees to her chest. She wanted to get back into her chair. It was so much easier in the chair. Basil hooked a hand around her belt, braced his legs, and pulled her into a sitting position. She collapsed bonelessly against the wall. Go, she whispered. Leave. He squatted next to her, brushed her sweaty hair away from her face, and shined his cell phone into her eyes. They were unfocused, unseeing. I can't leave you here. I'm your supervisor. It's my responsibility to keep you safe. Amy slumped over onto one side and tried to crawl away. Her arms were on fire, her muscles felt like they'd been torn apart and stapled back together. They pulled and knotted in all the wrong directions, and they didn't fit inside her skin. Her body felt old and frail. Basil tried to stop her, but she kept crawling. She wanted to slither back into the darkness. She wanted this useless struggle to end. She mindlessly began to crawl along the wall. Basil doesn't understand, Amy thought, but if he keeps talking, they're going to hear him, and they are going to come, and they are going to fix his sickness too. That thought made Amy smile. Maple, please don't do that. Sorry. Come here. Come here. Maple. Come sit. Come sit. Come over here. Okay. Don't worry, she said. He'll make you whole again. Who will? Warden Worth, Amy said. Do you mean Carl, the homeless guy? Is he Warden Worth? She tried to shake her head, but even this simple gesture triggered another excruciating flash of pain. The warden is inside Carl. He wears Carl like a glove. The warden wants to help us. Amy, I don't know what you're talking about, Basil said, but something's really wrong with you. Do you know where we are? What day it is? We're in the beehive, Amy said. There is no beehive. You're not thinking straight. It's where we get what we deserve. We're in Orsk, Basil said. No, she said. We've always been in the beehive. There is nowhere else. Right, Basil said. Again, he tried lifting her, and again, Amy went limp in his arms. When he paused to adjust his grip, she spilled back onto the floor. Basil walked away again, and this time she hoped he was gone for good. Amy let the blackness wash over her and carry her away. True, she no longer had the security of the tranquilizing chair, but as long as she didn't move or fight, as long as she surrendered, she could feel like she was still part of the beehive. There was a low rumble in the distance, and Amy knew Warden Worth was coming back for her. He would return her to the chair, or perhaps he would administer a stronger cure. The rumble grew louder, and Amy relaxed her body to welcome him. She was tired of feeling sick and broken. She wanted to be whole. She searched the darkness, waiting for her master. Instead, Basil's face emerged from the gloom, faintly illuminated by his cell phone. He was pushing a rolling Hugo office chair. As soon as he stopped moving, the rumbling stopped. He knelt beside her and said, "We're getting out of here." "You can't comprehend his plans for us." "You're right, Amy," he said. "I don't know what's going on, but I am still responsible for your safety." He hauled her up by her arms, dumping her limp body into the Hugo. Amy tried to slide out, but Basil was too quick. He grabbed her shoulders, holding her in place. With a gentle push, he rolled the chair forward, and they set off down the bright and shining path. The chair made an enormous racket, and Amy felt safe in the knowledge that all this noise would guide Warden Worth to them. She relaxed and looked around. A limp banner drooled from the ceiling. Most days, it read, "Bring new life into your home," but in the darkness she could make out only the last two words, "your home." Basil swung his cell phone back and forth. Its dim gray glow enough to illuminate couches and armchairs, but not strong enough to reveal whatever was crouched behind them. "Almost there," he said. "We'll get outside, and if we're lucky, the police will be here. They'll help me get everyone else out." "We're not going anywhere," Amy said. Ahead of them, the bright and shining path was blocked by a tall barricade of toppled furniture, a huge heaping mound of Ficaro storage units, Nelly Pot media organizers, Goudeval rocking chairs, and smashed Kummersbeck desks. An overturned impulse bin was slung onto its side, beige shopping bags avalanching onto the floor. Broken glass was everywhere. Amy remembered the filthy hands, slick with grime, sliding over her face. She wanted to run away, but she needed to go back. Run away or go back? "We have to go the other way," Basil whispered. He spun around to face Kitchens, and Amy smiled to herself. The more he struggled, the sooner he'd realize the hopelessness of their situation. They were never getting out. Warden Worth would just extend their sentences, adding years and years and years. He would be so angry that Amy had gotten out of her chair. He would be so angry she'd stopped her treatment. Basil pushed her off the path toward the shortcut door between kitchens and wardrobes, only to discover it was barricaded with more smashed furniture. Alone, Basil might have climbed over it, but with Amy it was impossible. "Not a problem," he insisted. "We'll take the long way around." He turned the chair back toward dining rooms. Amy realized that her lungs no longer hurt as badly. She was breathing more normally. Her head felt clearer, and the time spent in the restraining chair was receding from memory. "You're trapped," she whispered. "We're fine," Basil assured her, but his voice was a little less certain. "We'll simply have to go through the back of the house." One of the wheels of the Hugo began to squeak, making a steady eek, eek, eek as they rolled along, a clear beacon to anything waiting in the dark. "There's nowhere to go," Amy said. "We have to do something," Basil said. "We can't just crawl under a sofa and hide until the sun comes up." The first thing that hit them was the cold, a blast of frigid air that snatched the breath from their throats. Then came the stink, so strong it made Amy's eyes water. It was like a train of rotten meat passing in the dark. It was so close and so enormous it chased all thought of being cured from Amy's brain and left just one thing in its place: fear. Basil stopped rolling the chair and listened. Then he leaned down. "Can you run?" he whispered into her ear. Amy was too scared to answer. Of course she couldn't run. She didn't think she could even stand. Basil looked around, frightened for the first time. "I can't push you fast enough." They could hear it now. Footsteps, dozens of them, hundreds of them, all of them shuffling forward in lockstep. Basil hauled Amy from the chair and dragged her down an aisle, stashing her underneath a petrichor dining table, away from the filthy rotting Leviathan bearing down on them, making the floor shake, filling the air with its stink. Whatever happens, he whispered over the vast, soft, rotten noises that were getting louder, don't help me. I can handle this. Just wait until they're gone and then get out of here. He walked back to the bright and shining path, holding his cell phone above his head, a signal in the dark. Something in the shadows surged toward him. As it emerged out of the darkness, Amy saw that it had hundreds of legs, with filthy bare feet, packed so closely together that they looked like they belonged to a single creature. She realized she was seeing an army stretching off into the store. They were dressed in loose striped shirts and pants, their heads bowed forward, each man's forehead resting on the back of the neck of the man in front of him. They were standing so close that they looked like a great segmented centipede made of dead flesh. They stopped just a few feet in front of Basil. Basil tried to look brave. He stood tall in the center of the path, legs apart, silhouetted by the light of his phone. But then he saw them. He got a good, careful look at them, and whatever he had expected to see, it wasn't this. His expression faltered, and he fell back on his training. Orsk is closed for the evening. All of you are trespassing on private property. For the briefest of moments, nothing moved. Then his cell phone went into sleep mode, extinguishing the last glimmer of light from the showroom, and the penitence fell upon him. And then, at the very end of the chapter, we have this page from the Orsk Leadership Culture Handbook, and it says, handling a disruptive presence. Here are the procedures to follow when finding a disruptive presence in your work environment. 1. Assess. Is the DP alone? Is the DP intoxicated? Is the DP displaying physical aggression? 2. Approach. Whenever possible, partner with another team leader for approach. Always approach in clear view of the DP. Stand no closer than 6 feet from the DP. Announce. Clearly state your position at Orsk. Explain store guideline or policy the DP is violating. Request that the DP leave store immediately. Remember, safety of guests and store partners is paramount. Once their safety is secured, the secondary leadership objective is protecting money and merchandise. So that is it for chapter 11, and I'll be reading chapter 12 soon. I can tell you right now that these furniture catalogs, information sections are getting a little bit crazier. So you have that to look forward to. So thanks for joining me, and bye.